Anthony Rivardo. Today, we're taking a look at some pass rushers in free agency. As we know, the Giants need some help at the outside linebacker position, but there's some good scheme fits in this free agency class, and there's a lot of guys who are going to be cut in the coming days, especially with free agency starting officially on March 17th. Expect a lot of guys to be released. Expect a lot of movement. Teams are still trying to clear cap space. It's going to be pretty insane to see, how this actually goes down. But the Giants, for the most part, don't really have much space to work with. Obviously, I think they're going to do some interesting things. We just found out that Nate Solder restructured his contract. So we're going to see what those numbers look like if they have a little bit more room to work with. He was projected to make a significant amount. If they were going to cut him pre-June 1st, it was going to be $6 million cap savings. Post-June 1st, $10 million. But now he's pretty much solidified. He's going to be here for 2021. I estimate he'll be the starting right tackle. But I'll cover all this in another video for you guys just to run it down, what I think is going to happen there. But Anthony, how are you doing, my friend? And you excited to talk about some pass rushers?
I'm definitely excited to talk about some pass rushers. We've had some fans in the Discord and in the comment sections, requesting that we discuss pass rushers. So we're recording this on Saturday. We'll go live Sunday. Sunday is the start of the legal tampering period, right? So technically the start of free agency. This is when players can actually agree to contracts with new teams, right? We might wake up tomorrow and their hopes and dreams of Kenny Golladay or any of these pass rushers that we're about to discuss might already be crushed. I don't know. We'll see. It should be fun. I'm very excited for the legal tampering period to begin. Very excited for Wednesday when the new league year begins, when we have to get all those contracts signed, get everybody under the cap. That's going to be fun. Should be a lot of trades that happen within the next week and a lot of, surprise signings and big names going to new teams and new markets. It's going to be a fun time, exciting time. But yeah, man, I'm excited. There's a few pass rushers that we can discuss. It's funny because the Giants, it's unfortunate that we don't have a lot of cap space this offseason because this is an offseason where this free agency class is absolutely loaded, and it's loaded in all of the positions that the Giants really need to sign players, right? Like our biggest weaknesses, I think we're all in agreement. It's like edge rusher, offensive guard, wide receiver, cornerback. Offensive guard, there are a ton of guards on the market right now. There's a ton of talented receivers, and there's a ton of edge rushers, and there's still a few solid cornerbacks as well. So all of their positions of weaknesses, man, I wish the Giants had more money to spend because we could really patch up some of those holes right now if we had money to spend. But hopefully this Nate Solder deal, we don't know the details yet. I'm sure by the time we're finished recording this video, we'll know the details. Giants definitely need to clear some more cap space. It's probably not the last move they're going to make with Nate Solder. Hopefully they can get the Leonard Williams deal done. Maybe they'll even do that while we're discussing the pass rushers in this video. Hopefully they can get that done as soon as possible because this is a really good free agency class, and like I said, there's a lot of talented edge rushers that we're about to get into.
Absolutely. A couple people have brought up some interesting names. I've heard, Bud Dupree, of course. I've heard Carl Lawson, Shaq Barrett, Matthew Judon. There's a couple of talented players. And the Giants, as we know, have some issues at outside linebacker. It's fair to mention that they will be getting back Lorenzo Carter and Ocean Exhibitors. But how much can we really instill faith and confidence that they can hold it down for the long term? I don't know if I feel that way, Anthony. I don't know if I feel as though I want to put all my chips in on Exhibitors and Carter, despite seeing a little bit of growth before they both went down. We need consistency, continuity. We need somebody, who's going to be there week in and week out, and I just don't think I trust them at this point any longer. And as for that, they're both third-round picks. They were shots to begin with. They were hole pluggers. They were never supposed to be elite starters. Of course, you can find starters in those rounds nonetheless, but from what we've seen, I'm not totally convinced that they are the future at the position. Now, they will be here. They will be competing, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't allocate resources toward it. It really comes down to how much money we have. I don't know who is going to be making the most. I imagine Shaq Barrett is going to be the most coveted option on the market. But, Judon, another guy that could get a nice price. Bud Dupree tore his Achilles last year. I don't know if he's even going to be healthy for a majority of the 2021 season. So, if you are going to go out and sign a guy like Bud Dupree, you're pretty much going into it knowing he's not going to be around for the first half of the year. And you're just taking that shot because you see his long-term potential. Maybe he signs a one-year deal. Really awful for him to have this injury at the end of the season in a contract year. Just really, really tough news for him. But if I'm looking at anybody for the Giants, it's really going to be someone that fits our scheme. I think Matthew Judon fits our scheme really well. Carl Lawson is more of a traditional defensive end, but, the Giants are multiple. It's something Anthony mentioned to me before the podcast. He thinks that maybe they could fit him in there. But, I think Matthew Judon's probably the guy that I would look at. Shaq Barrett, of course, he's going to be the most expensive, in my opinion, on the market. That guy's an absolute stud. Shaq Barrett is coming off a Super Bowl win. He's coming from a very, very good team. He might be a guy that you're looking to really upgrade that unit. But again, I don't know if we have the money to do it. Do you think the Giants could even try and make a bid realistically for Shaq Barrett?
No. I wish. 2018-2019 offseason, when Shaq Barrett left the Denver Broncos, I wrote a couple articles, and we discussed it on way back when, before we were doing YouTube, when we were just doing a podcast. I think it was called Keeping Up with the G-Men at that point. A real throwback here. When we were doing that, one of my top free agent targets for the Giants was Shaq Barrett. I loved him. I thought that he was phenomenal. He was just playing behind Von Miller and then playing behind Bradley Chubb. Never really got the full opportunity to be a starter and get to show what he was truly capable of. But I feel like he was always really good in limited snaps. He would play a little bit and he would be really impressive. And so I always thought once he got his job, like as a starting edge rusher, he would just take off and be a monster. He learned so much behind Von Miller, playing in such a great defense with a great defensive coordinator in Denver. I really thought there was a lot of talent there to work with, and I knew it would come cheap. I really was hoping and praying the Giants would just sign Shaq Barrett to a one-year prove-it deal, let him do what he could do best. Instead, they signed like Kareem Martin, and then Tampa Bay went and signed Shaq Barrett, and 1 year, $5 million deal. Then he went and led the NFL in sacks with 19, had a phenomenal season, and had another phenomenal season this year as well. Won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. Doesn't seem like he's going to go anywhere. Seems like, they just cleared a lot of cap space with the restructuring of Tom Brady's contract. I think their main goal is to keep all of their pieces. They don't really need to add anybody. They're a Super Bowl winning team. So I think Shaq Barrett ultimately ends up back in Tampa Bay. I think he re-signs to a long-term extension, which sucks. I would love him on the Giants. I've wanted him on the Giants for years now, and we have another opportunity where we could potentially get him, but the Giants just don't have the money for it. It's not going to come cheap. Shaq Barrett's definitely going to get at least $20 million a year, and there's no possibility of the Giants paying both Leonard Williams and Shaq Barrett over $20 million a year. That is impossible, and especially if you want to talk about trying to get Kenny Golladay for $20 million a year, you could kiss that goodbye. The Giants just don't have the money to do it. As much as I wish that they did, they don't. So really, realistically, I would like them to just find the next Shaq Barrett, find the next one-year prove-it-deal edge rusher for $5 million. See if you could find that guy. Might be a little bit harder to locate this year. It's really a loaded edge rusher class anyway, but I'd rather them try to find the next Shaq Barrett rather than go spend the money on Shaq Barrett. I would love Shaq Barrett. We just can't afford it.
Yeah, I mean, my target personally is Hassan Reddick. That's the guy that I think would be a great fit for the Giants. He entered the league as a pass rusher. The Cardinals wanted to move him to off-ball linebacker, and it didn't really pan out very well. They finally decided, okay, let's move him back to outside linebacker last year. And he ended up with 12 and a half sacks, 5 of which came against the Giants. He set a franchise record. And people say, he had a lot of sacks, but a lot of them came in spurts. Like, it was like 1 or 2 or 3 games that he had all of his sacks in. And I'm like, that's kind of what happens. Like, Leonard Williams had 3 sacks against Seattle. Like, that's kind of what happens. Like, guys just have standout performances, and it's good that guys can have standout performances, take over a game, and win you a game, more or less. The Cardinals beat us with their pass rush. We could have beat them. Our defense played well. So, I'm sitting here like, okay, Hassan Reddick isn't going to be a money breaker on the market. He's not going to make an absurd amount of money. His contract will be somewhat reasonable, and I think he has a ton of potential. He's a guy that I really think could come to the Giants. Patrick Graham could utilize him very, very strategically. He's an above average pass rusher with more potential to spare. And he's good size, 6'1", 235 pounds. He had 6 forced fumbles last year, 6 forced fumbles, and 43 solo tackles. He's a guy he's an impact player in my opinion, and I think at the right price, the Giants should take a gander on him. I really don't think he's going to be making insane money because there are so many players available this year. Matt Judon, Melvin Ingram, Bud Dupree, Shaquille Barrett, Olivier Vernon, Leonard Floyd, KJ Wright, Kyler Fackrell's still out there. And then the defensive end group is just as impressive. You have Carlos Dunlap, Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue, Ryan Kerrigan, Tyrone Crawford, Henry Anderson, Solomon Thomas, Everson Griffin, Alex Okafor. Hassan Reddick's not even close to being the top of any of those guys. He's way down the list, so I think he's going to have no choice but to settle for a cost-efficient deal. The Cardinals just elected not to franchise tag him. They're letting him walk. I think the Giants could probably scoop him up on a relatively affordable contract. What do you think about that? Do you think Hassan Reddick would be a good fit for us?
So Hassan Reddick's interesting, right? Because I just mentioned the Giants should try and find the next Shaq Barrett. if anybody's going to be the next Shaq Barrett, it's probably going to be Hassan Reddick. You know, he's 26 years old, which is about what Shaq Barrett was when he left Denver, right? 26 years old, coming off of a 12.5 sack season. So he's definitely broken out more than Shaq Barrett did when he was with Denver. He never had a season like that where, you know, that really screamed he could be a potential standout edge rusher. So with Hassan Reddick, though, it's interesting because it's kind of similar to Shaq Barrett, where he didn't really have his full opportunity until he did, right? This was his full opportunity. He was playing off-ball linebacker with Arizona, and then he moved back this season, 2020, moved back to his collegiate position of edge rusher. Was dominant, had 12.5 sacks, you know, like, wasn't necessarily good in the first half of the season, but second half he really turned it on. He had, 5 sacks against the Giants, you know, he absolutely dominated us, and he showed that he's got the ability to be a really solid edge rusher in the NFL. He just never had the opportunity to do it. So that's similar to Shaq Barrett, because Shaq Barrett flashes potential as a really solid edge rusher, just never had the opportunity to do it full time coming off of the edge 4 team as their starter. So potentially, you know, and his projected contract, Hassan Reddick, that is a 1 year, $8.5 million deal. So that's kind of affordable, kind of expensive for a 1 year prove it deal, but you know, he's kind of already proven that he is capable of doing some things. So that's why I think he's similar to Shaq Barrett. You know, you take a flyer on him if you can get him on a 1 year, $8 million deal. If you're the Giants, I think you try and go ahead and do that. You know, you see if he can top 10 sacks once again. If he can do that back-to-back seasons, then you feel more comfortable giving him a long-term extension, right? But I think I think a 1 year deal makes a lot of sense for Hassan Reddick. And going into the season, if he's able to post another 12 sacks, then you talk about the following season, either trying to tag and trade him or get him on a long-term extension as a true edge rusher, you know, because he really has versatility. We know that he played a lot of off-ball linebacker, wasn't very good as an off-ball linebacker, really struggled a lot. Moved over to the edge, is really good, but he has the traits to play both. He has the experience playing both now. So, you know, when you talk about Patrick Graham's versatile defense, right? You're talking about making Hassan Reddick that every down pass rusher, but you're also talking about, you know, disguising him and dropping him back into coverage as an off-ball linebacker, having him man up on a running back here and there while Lorenzo Carter sneakily rushes off the edge, or Blake Martinez comes on a stunt and Hassan Reddick drops back into coverage. You know, you can get really creative with a guy like Hassan Reddick who's got that versatility if you were to put him into Patrick Graham's scheme. So, you know, and so while I say he might be the next Shaq Barrett, I also say he's probably the best scheme fit with the Giants out of all of these guys in the free agency pool. So if any of these pass rushers make sense for the Giants, to me, it's Hassan Reddick. But again, Giants are really tight for cap space right now, and it seems like they have plans to sign players at other positions for a way higher price. So I don't know if Hassan Reddick is a realistic option for us, but I think that he's the best option for us in the edge rusher class.
I think that's well said. I think you really hit it on the head in terms of being a good scheme fit. We know that Patrick Graham loves to utilize those outside linebackers in coverage too. We saw with Carter Coughlin all the time. He would bring Carter Coughlin, you know, just dip him into cover 2 coverage. It was really nice to see how versatile he was utilizing these defensive players. And I think Hassan Reddick isn't going to get a blockbuster deal. He's going to get a pretty mediocre deal. And I think it's going to be good for the Giants if they can find some cap space. You know, Nate Solder's deal, I think they reduced his cap hit significantly. I think he'll only have about a $4 million cap hit this next season. They'll push the majority of it to next year.
Hopefully we find that any minute now. That's what you and I are doing. Everybody watching this already knows the details, but just reminder for those watching or listening, we're waiting for the details right now, recording this as it's being reworked. So we'll find out hopefully momentarily, and we'll be able to update you guys mid-video.
Exactly. So we're trying to figure out what these details look like, and that money is going to be very, very essential for the Giants moving forward. I mean, they already, you know, they cut Kevin Zeiler, so they have enough money to sign Leonard Williams if he was on the franchise tag, but, you know, they're not going to do that. I actually think I could see where they're going with this. I'm starting to get a good picture of what they're doing here. With the Kevin Zeiler savings, now you have an opportunity to extend Leonard Williams in the coming days, and they can lower that cap hit down to, you know, maybe $13 million instead of 19, maybe even lower than that. So if they can get it low, and then push most of the money to next year when they have a ton of cap space, they can go out and sign Kenny Golladay. Like, they can figure that out. They can get a wide receiver and a guy like Hassan Reddick. They could find 2 guys. The problem is they still need to find depth pieces. I think this year is going to be super interesting in terms of the draft. If there's any draft the Giants have a good opportunity to trade back in, it's this year, and I'll tell you why. There's not a lot of information out there on these players because there's no live pro days. All this stuff is being virtually held, right? A lot of this stuff is virtual. So there's going to be a lack of information on the draft picks, but the Giants are hiring a lot of college coaches. And I think that gives them a little bit of an advantage when it comes to knowing some of these players, knowing what they're bringing to the next level, having a bit more knowledge going into the draft, which might actually benefit them in a trade back because now they have more darts to throw. They have more selections, which they can fill depth pieces with in the mid rounds. They can also get some good guys in the first and second rounds. But with that being said, if you're going to trade back, that means you can use some of that money, the money that you can create on bigger players. You can go out and get Hassan Reddick, go out and get Kenny Galladay, and utilize those mid to late round picks for those hole pluggers, those depth pieces that your coaching staff now has better knowledge on. So Hassan Reddick is my preferred avenue because I think he's going to be undervalued based on how many edge rushers are in this class specifically. But people want to hear about Carl Lawson, Anthony. And he's a guy that's been kind of making some waves as of late. He's coming off his rookie deal with Cincinnati at 5.5 sacks last year, 32 quarterback hits. The guy was a menace. He got after the quarterback very well. He's a player that I could see, being an absolute stud on his next contract. And he might be an option. He was a former 4th-round pick. Maybe the Giants look that way. He's a defensive end, not the best pure scheme fit for us. And he might get paid. But like I said, there's a lot of players in the market. He might be a bit undervalued because of that. I heard, he is someone that isn't being talked about enough. So maybe he will get underpaid. With that being said, maybe he's an option. Anthony, what do you think about Carl Lawson as a suitable player?
So I think Carl Lawson is intriguing. You kind of hinted at it there with, is he a scheme fit, right? Because he played in Cincinnati. He is an edge rusher, okay, but he's not an edge rusher in the typical sense that he's a stand-up edge rusher who plays all outside linebacker as an edge rusher, right? He plays defensive end as an edge rusher, plays that 5-tech position. He still lines up over on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle as a 5-tech, which designates him as an edge rusher, but he doesn't stand up in that role. He has his hand in the dirt, so that makes him a little bit different because the Giants typically, while we are very multiple in our defense, and we do run a lot of nickel, and we do run a lot of 3-4 and 4-3. For the most part, our base defense is a 3-4, which means we have stand-up outside linebackers who are edge rushers, right? That's typically how the Giants' defense is constructed. Does Carl Lawson fit into that role? I don't know. He's really just been a 4-3 defensive end his entire career. I don't know if he can transition to be a stand-up outside linebacker. It's possible. I mean, it's a similar position, technically the same position because they're both edge rushers, but I don't know if this is necessarily a scheme fit for Carl Lawson. Now, of course, he had 59 pressures on 389 rushes this season. That's incredible. 59 pressures. He had the second most quarterback hits in the NFL this season with 32, and he's only 25 years old. So he's still growing. He's still improving. He's not even in his prime yet. He's just entering his prime. So this is the case where potentially a team could sign Carl Lawson to a deal, right? And this deal ends up in 2 years looking like an absolute steal, and he needs more money because he just starts outplaying it because he's still growing. He's only 25 years old, only 4 seasons into his career. Young guy, a lot of potential there, and 5.5 sacks this year, at 8.5 in his rookie year in 2017, but really turned it on this year. Those 32 quarterback hits, those 59 pressures, he's really starting to come into his own as a pass rusher. Has a tremendous burst off of the edge. So this is a guy who really has a high ceiling, could get a nice long-term extension that's kind of cheap compared to what it might look like in a couple of years. This could be a bargain bin free agency signing for a team where they get a really good deal on a young guy who has a lot of room to grow. So, and I know, here's another thing that I'll point out. I know a lot of Giants fans are interested in Carl Lawson because we had a Giants player doing a little bit of recruiting for Carl Lawson, right? Darius Slayton was tweeting at Carl Lawson, said, come wear some big blue with me, come be on this team. We need an edge rusher. So, potentially that could have something to do with where Carl Lawson wants to go in free agency, but at the end of the day, might be hard to get him to fit into the scheme. I don't know. It's very interesting for sure. Carl Lawson is a really interesting case here, but I love the potential as a 25-year-old edge rusher who had 59 pressures last season. I love his potential, and I think that he's going to go somewhere. I don't know where he's going to go. If he goes to the Giants, I'm all for it. I'll be excited. But I think wherever he goes, he's going to end up making this contract that he gets look like a real bargain. I think that he's going to grow into his own and actually become a very solid player over the next 4 years.
I think I actually agree 100% with that. I think he's a player that teams are looking at and saying he's just scratching the surface of his potential. He is someone that has a lot more room to grow. He's 25. He's still so young. Really hasn't even hit his prime yet. So I think that's a big point here. Like, he's really going into his prime. And he's coming off a season, like you mentioned, with a ton of production, 32 quarterback hits, 5.5 sacks. 4 tackles for a loss. Just overall great season. Two forced fumbles. I like him. I think if the Giants got him, he'd be an instant impact player. But again, not sure about the scheme fit. They'd have to try to play a little bit more 4-3. But then, why do you have Leonard Williams? Why do you have 3 interior defenders who are going to be playing 4-3? It's hard, but you can play Leonard Williams as a 3 or 5 tech outside. So I'm not so worried about that. You could play LW as a defensive end. Right.
I'll say Leonard Williams actually played a lot of 5 tech this past season. He had a couple sacks at that 5 tech role, specifically against Seattle. We saw them move him all over the place. We saw him play, the 2-eye. We saw him play the 3, 4, and even the 5 tech position. Like, he moved all over that defensive line. Very versatile player. So potentially you could see Carl Lawson fit into a role like that. But he's going to have to play a lot more 5 tech than usual, and the Giants just don't play that much 5 tech. When they play 5 tech, Leonard Williams kicks out to 5 tech, but they don't play a lot of 5 tech because they are a base 3-4 team. And I don't think that Carl Lawson has the size necessarily to move into that inside 3 tech position, start lining up over guards. I think he's a guy you want strictly on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle, playing a 5 tech or transitioning to be a stand-up edge rusher. So that's why I'm just not sure about his scheme fit with the Giants. But, Patrick Graham is an amazing coach, amazing coordinator. I'm sure that he can make it work. If they decide that they can make Carl Lawson work, then I'm going to put my trust into Patrick Graham and say that they've got a role for him. They're going to figure it out, and he's going to be a great player.
Yeah, 6'2", 225, so he's a little bigger than most outside linebackers would probably be for your stand-up pass rusher, but I think he's capable. Guys have done it in the past. We saw Olivier Vernon. They tried to transfer him over to outside linebacker. His injuries kind of hurt him there, but players have done it. I think Carl Lawson, if they were going to use a more multiple scheme, you could use Dexter Lawrence. Let's say they kept Dalvin Thomas, and you could use DT and Dexter as your interior defensive lineman, then kick out Leonard Williams to 5 tech, and then have Carl Lawson at 5 tech. You could do that. I would be totally fine with that, because then you could use DT and Dexter as like 2 techs and not have
2
a
eyes,
nose tackle. Yeah,
they'd be the 2 eyes or the 1 techs, right? But that basically would be reworking the entire base defense of the Giants. So that's like a whole defensive conversion there based on your front 7, and then you have to then look at the second level, right? Because we have a lot of stand-up outside edge rushers. Carter Coughlin's better as an edge rusher. Cam Brown is an edge rusher. Lorenzo Carter and O'Shane Zimenez are edge rushers. They're not really great at that outside linebacker pass coverage role. So then you're really talking about reworking the whole defense in a way that I just don't think the Giants can afford to do with their salary cap situation, and I don't really think that they should do, considering we do have talented players in this 3-4 defense. Probably best to just stick with that and try and find a different defined role for Carl Lawson within that 3-4, rather than reworking the whole defense to become a 4-3 just to fit Carl Lawson's playing style.
Yeah, we also don't necessarily have the right linebackers for it. Like, Blake Martinez is a good run stuffer, but we need linebackers who can really rush the passer too. I'm thinking like Levante David and Devin White. Like, those are the guys you want. If you're
well, those guys are phenomenal in coverage. Like, you need really good. Those outside linebackers in a 4-3 are outside linebackers who play a lot of pass coverage. In a 3-4, they're outside linebackers who are truly edge rushers and play a lot of pass rushing. So for the Giants, we don't really have those pass coverage inside or off-ball linebackers. We don't have that at all. Even Blake Martinez struggles still in pass coverage. He just doesn't. He's not in coverage that often. He's strictly playing the run or pass rushing. That's the beauty of Patrick Graham's scheme. Yeah, he's manned up. That's the beauty of Patrick Graham's scheme. It's really playing to the strengths of the players that we have on the roster right now. So if we were to switch over to that 4-3 and try and convert there, I just don't think it would work out with the linebackers that we have, with the defensive linemen that we have. I just don't think that it would be, I don't think there's any way with the players that we have on this current roster, without reworking the entirety of the defense, I just don't think you can make that conversion of 4-3 in one offseason.
Yeah, so, that kind of rules out Carl Lawson unless they're going to take him and then transition to OLB, but at that point, I'd rather just go Hassan Reddick or Matt Judon. Probably Reddick just because he's going to be cheaper than Judon, in my opinion. Judon is coming off a year with 6 sacks, 21 quarterback hits. He plays with Baltimore. He made a Pro Bowl last year, and in 2019, he's an absolute stud. So you're getting a very, very established player who what you're getting with. Hassan Reddick has a little bit more like risk to it, but the upside is 12.5 sacks like we saw last year. And when you have a very good interior defensive line, Hassan Reddick 1v1, we saw what he did to Andrew Thomas. I think he had 5 sacks against him. So he's a very good player. And an offensive lineman across the NFL, most teams don't have great offensive linemen. Like, that's why they're so coveted. That's why they're so valuable. So you have a guy like Hassan Reddick, and you're taking up all those double teams in the interior. Reddick could absolutely feast on the outside in 1v1 matchups. So that's why I like him personally. I think he would fit very, very well. And putting some more competition at OLB is never a bad thing. I don't trust Carter. I don't trust Ximenez at the moment. I really got to see more from them in terms of health and just consistent production. But I think those are the primary guys that we're looking at right now. Is there anyone else on your mind, Anthony, that might... let's just talk about Ngakoue and Clowney for a second, because those are two guys who could also transition to outside linebacker. Clowney has done it. Yannick Ngakoue has too. I think that Clowney's too much of a risk. I'm not willing to go down that road right now. And Ngakoue going to be too expensive. What do you think about those guys?
I'll say with Judon, I think Judon's interesting. I want to just throw out the projected contract details according to Pro Football Focus for him. He's projected 4 years, $17 million on average annually. Kind of puts him out of the Giants' price range right there. I don't think we have that kind of long-term flexibility with our cap space. Plus, he's 28 and a half years old already. So not exactly sure that that's a guy that I want to lock in for another 4 years, because his pass rush productivity is good but not great. His sack numbers might be high, but a lot of that could be cleanup sacks. But anyway, I'll talk about the other guys. Yannick Ngakoue is really interesting. I think Yannick Ngakoue is a player who had a lot of potential going into the last free agency period and then didn't live up to that. Signed with, I believe, Minnesota, got traded to Baltimore, was just kind of a total mess. His whole year, his past year has just kind of been a mess, Yannick Ngakoue, right? So, but he started to play better with Baltimore, and, that does show, because Baltimore does run that 3-4. Jacksonville was really running more of a 4-3. Shows he's got scheme versatility. He can play in either role. He can play with his hand in the dirt. He can stand up and rush on the outside. So, he's got that versatility. I do still believe, and I thought this last offseason, that he would be a really good scheme fit with the Giants. I think that he could really be an excellent player for us, potentially, but I don't know. Again, he's another guy projected 4 years, $17.5 million. Don't know if that's something that the Giants can afford to do right now. The other player that you mentioned, Jadeveon Clowney, that's who it was. He's going to get a 1-year deal, because he was absolutely a disappointment this past year. He's going to get a 1-year prove-it deal once again, because he was the guy last year who wanted a boatload of money, didn't get it, got a 1-year deal, did not live up to that 1-year deal. He's gonna, yeah. I'm not crazy about Jadeveon Clowney. One thing that I'll say with Clowney, when he was playing, when he played at Michigan, I believe he was a 4-3 defensive end. I believe he was playing that 5-tech role, and then I believe he got to the league. He started playing that stand-up outside edge rusher role with Houston, and then I think he had some productivity, but never finished it with sacks. And that's always, when we talk about hidden production, you're always talking about Jadeveon Clowney when you discuss that, because he never really had 10 sacks in a season, but he had a ton of pressures. And the main thing about Jadeveon Clowney that people don't actually seem to know about him, he's actually, and this is noted in this Pro Football Focus summary, Clowney is a 95th percentile run defender. He's one of the best run defenders in the NFL off the edge. 77th percentile pass rusher, so slightly above average there. He's above average pass rushing edge rusher, but he's actually always, throughout the entirety of his career, been one of the best run defending edge rushers in the NFL. And so that's really interesting for the Giants, a team that loves to stop the run, but really relies on the interior of their defensive line to stop the run. We've got Leonard Williams, we've got Dexter Lawrence, we've got Dalvin Tomlinson, B.J. Hill. We've got a lot invested into that interior defensive line to stop the run. So it would be interesting. Our run defense would probably turn really elite if you went to that second level, got Jadeveon Clowney, paired him with off-ball linebacker like Blake Martinez. Our run defense is probably top in the NFL at that point, with that interior, with Clowney off the edge, with Martinez in the middle. That's excellent run defending. He has been one of the best run defenders in the NFL through his career, off of the edge at least. But in terms of trying to supplement a pass rush, right, because that's what the Giants are looking for. They want that difference maker off of the edge, that pass rusher to rush off of the edge. I don't think Clowney is necessarily the fit there. Plus 1 year, you can't really extend that salary cap hit down the line. You can't kick that down the can at all. You're just going to take one lump sum, and it's going to go right into this year's salary cap. And this is a year where we don't have a lot of salary cap. So don't know if Clowney makes a lot of sense. Don't think that he's what we're looking for in our edge rushers. But I do think that he will continue to go to teams and be a really good run defending edge rusher. But I think that fans need to realize when teams are signing him, they're not necessarily signing him to be this 10-plus sack pass rusher that every fan expects him to be.
He seals the edge.
Probably signing him just to be an amazing, seal off the edge and defend the run, because that's what he does best.
Yeah, I think that's pretty realistic. But again, the health history is alarming. I would stay away. Go with someone younger. Go with somebody who showed some upside last year. Jadeveon Clowney is just a disappointment waiting to happen at this point. I'm off that boat. Give me people who are healthy. That's best ability is availability, in my opinion, at this point. The Giants simply can't keep their guys healthy, especially at outside linebacker. You know, Carter, Ximenez both missed majority of the season with their own individual injuries. We need to see more health from that position, and I think getting a guy who historically has had better luck in that area might be a little bit more efficient for us. But as always, guys, thank you so much for being to Fireside Giants, breaking down some of these pass rushers with Anthony and I on this beautiful weekend. Hopefully you're enjoying the nice weather. I feel like I'm on a flight, and I'm like, oh, we're going to be arriving in New York soon. It's 66 degrees, and we'll be touching down in 30 minutes. But one day, one day. Regardless, hope you guys have an awesome weekend. We'll catch you guys on the next video.